Many of the nation's favourites.
The economy from ruin. The next few hours will be crucial as they struggle to meet the terms of an international bailout. Lancashire Council finds horse meat in products imported from Hungary. 40 kilograms of the meat, labelled as diced beef, has already been sold. Newly released papers show the tensions between Margaret Thatcher and her colleagues in the run-up to the Falklands War. The documents from 1982 are part of Lady Thatcher's private archive. A fond farewell to the BBC's old home. The building that brought us some of Britain's best-loved shows will close its doors after more than 50 years of broadcasting. And coming up, we'll be getting more analysis on the options for a solution in Cyprus. Thousands of Margaret Thatcher's private papers from her time as Prime Minister are being made available to the public for the first time. They're from 1982, the year of the Falklands War, and they'll go on display in Cambridge and online. Our correspondent, Bridget Kendall, reports.
As Prime Minister, she was known as the Iron Lady, famous for her steely refusal to compromise. But the private Margaret Thatcher was as susceptible to anxiety during the Falklands conflict as everyone else.
Dear Stephen, forgive me for not having...
This letter, among her personal papers, was to a constituent as the conflict was hotting up in late April.
There has been an activity and tenseness I never thought to experience.
When the fight to take back the islands began in earnest, grim reports began to come through of ships being hit and inevitable casualties. On one occasion, at a constituency event, she broke down in tears. It took 40 minutes to pull herself together.
We had her backstage ready to go on and be there as the Prime Minister. And she was immensely upset. She was in tears. I'm the first British Prime Minister in so many years to have to send British people to their deaths in war.
Perhaps most revelatory from the early days of the crisis is the extraordinary split in her own party, which must have left her feeling somewhat isolated. What's fascinating about these private papers is the mood they reveal behind the scenes among Tory MPs. The Whip's office reports solid support from some. My constituents want blood, says one, and an invasion as quickly as possible. But from others, we're making a big mistake. It'll make the Suez crisis look like common sense, and let the Argentinians have the Falklands with as little fuss as possible. The private documents being released from the archives today cover not only the Falklands, but also a big trip to China. Her papers show she personally oversaw every detail, from which outfit to wear to the sea slugs and fish lips on the banquet menu. But when it came to tackling the Chinese over another sovereignty issue, Hong Kong, this time she was prepared to compromise.
She realised that, you know, there was no way we could defend it militarily, and therefore we had to make an accommodation, and long term it was theirs.
Pragmatic over Hong Kong, fearless over the Falklands, and underneath it all, as she showed again when years later she was forced out of office, equally vulnerable. Bridget Kendall, BBC.
Well, more now on our main story, the disruption being caused by the severe weather across the country. In southwest England, it's rain that's the problem, with 12 flood warnings in force. But in other parts of the UK, it's snow that's the issue. Over 1,000 schools were shut today, and there's also been travel chaos and power cuts to thousands of homes. Mervyn Jess has been monitoring the situation in Northern Ireland.
Springtime for motorists in Northern Ireland. Taking to the roads today necessitated taking a shovel. Winter hit back with a vengeance overnight, with people waking up to snowdrifts whipped up by high winds.
It's really bad up here. It always has been. You always get it worse. I think it's just because you're up so high.
Near blizzard conditions swept across northern and eastern areas. Some made it through the weather, others didn't.
We left the house at Green Island at 7:30, sat on the Manse Road for an hour and a half and then abandoned the car and have walked ever since. It's about 3 miles.
I was used to way up near the Coal Mountain and I was used to the snow anyhow, so that was just get up, just wrap up and get on with it right enough.
There were major problems on the roads. Many of them were only possible with extreme care, like here on the A1 to Newry at Hillsborough, where conditions were treacherous. Other people found themselves having to dig in to get out. Schools were also badly hit. Many closed because buses couldn't get to them.
Outside school this morning, I was there at 6:30. We had drifting snow blocking the road, some tree branches down, so very impassable, very treacherous conditions.
Just didn't expect to hit this, because when we left home it was pretty good. So now we have a decision to go back or try and get on. But unbelievable. First day of spring, second day of spring, incredible.
Conditions are tough for wildlife and those animals out in the fields. Sport has also been hit. Tonight's World Cup qualifier between Northern Ireland and Russia at Belfast Windsor Park has fallen victim to the conditions.
We were warned that this was coming, but when it hits, there's not much we can do about it. The high winds and the driving snow make life unpleasant, to say the least, with power cuts in the home and disruption getting to and from work.
Mervyn Jess reporting from Northern Ireland. The funeral has taken place of the 16-year-old girl who was stabbed to death on a bus in Birmingham 2 weeks ago. Christina Edkins was killed as she travelled to school. Her family say they've been overwhelmed by the support of well-wishers. A man has been charged with her murder. Jeremy Cook reports.
They came to remember Christina. They came in their hundreds. They came despite the bitter cold, wearing purple, her favourite colour, a sign of solidarity for a community still deep in shock. Christina Edkins was a daughter, a sister, a friend. She was a schoolgirl. She was 16 years old.
We're devastated that she should have been taken away so senselessly and continue to try to come to terms with what has happened. We have been overwhelmed and comforted by the spontaneous reactions of so many people.
Christina Edkins died in a knife attack as she took the bus to school. A fleeting moment of violence, leaving her family facing a lifetime of grief. A 22-year-old man is in custody, charged with her murder. A difficult day for so many here. A last goodbye for a daughter her mum and dad called Princess. Jeremy Cook, BBC News, Birmingham.
Abroad now, a state of emergency has been declared in 4 Burmese towns after 3 days of violence between Buddhists and Muslims left as many as 20 people dead and dozens injured. An argument between a Muslim jewellery shop owner and his Buddhist clients is believed to have sparked the clashes. Well, our correspondent Jonathan Head reports now on the violence.
Maytila is one of the few Burmese towns outside Rakhine State with a large Muslim population. Now it too has been consumed by the fires of communal hatred. What started as a dispute in a gold shop escalated quickly, with mobs setting entire districts alight. I'm so sad about what happened here, says this community leader. As a Buddhist, I don't want to see anyone hurt. The police were unable, or perhaps unwilling, to stop the distraction. Here they hurriedly evacuate hundreds of people from their burning neighbourhood. A crowd watching from a distance shouts abuse. Go on, hit them, they urge the police. One of Burma's best-known dissidents arrived to try to calm the mood in Maytila. Minko 9 spent 17 years in prison for opposing the old military regime Now he finds himself struggling to persuade people caught up in a vortex of historic fear and mistrust to be patient. The new government has proved unable to deal with the anger that erupted last year in Rakhine State and elsewhere in dozens of land disputes. Mektela now joins a growing list of communities for whom the new era in Burma has brought more pain than promise. Jonathan Head, BBC News, Bangkok.
More now on the situation today in Cyprus, where problems at the island's banks have brought the financial system to the brink of collapse. Now, today, MPs embarked on a last-ditch talks aimed at finding a solution. That's after an EU bailout plan earlier in the week was rejected. The Parliament has until Monday to come up with a plan of action. Well, last Friday, Eurozone ministers agree the terms of €10 billion bailout for Cyprus and its ailing banks. In return, they asked the country to raise €5.8 billion. Cyprus says it will impose a levy or a tax on savers to fund it. The day after, panic spreads across the country. Savers rush to withdraw cash, sparking a run on the banks. By Monday, to ease the panic, the Cypriot Parliament says savers with less than €20,000 in their accounts will be exempted from the tax, but all others still face charges of up to 10%. By Tuesday, that plan is overwhelmingly rejected by MPs. On Wednesday, the President restarts crisis talks with the ECB, the IMF and the European Commission to work on a new deal. By yesterday, with banks still closed, many Cypriots are struggling to carry on with daily life without access to money. And today, the President has been holding more talks with the bailout troika, the EU, the ECB and the IMF, but he warns that the future of the country will be determined within hours. With me now, Hugo Dixon, a financial analyst and editor at Reuters. Welcome, Hugo. Thank you for coming in.
Great to be here, Julian.
What do you believe those MPs should conclude tonight?
Well, I honestly think they've got to do a deal, and they've essentially got to do a deal which is similar to the deal that they rejected only a few days ago, but with the Cypriot economy now being in far worse shape because a week of panic and chaos has destroyed confidence inside Cyprus and also from outside Cyprus about Cyprus. So the economy is in a far worse shape, but they are being dragged, kicking and screaming, to do something similar to what they should have done last week. Now, there is a twist to it. What people are talking about, and we don't know the details yet, but what people are talking about is that there will be 2 or 3 main chunks to a deal, because as you talked in your introduction about that $5.8 billion. One chunk is that the second largest bank, the Popular Bank, also known as Laiki, is going to be resolved, which is a sort of polite name for putting it into an orderly bankruptcy. And what that will mean is that those depositors with less than 100,000 will be okay, but those with more than 100,000, the word is they'll lose about 40%.
So that's why you say similar to the initial deal, but not the same. So those with less money will not have to fork out at all.
That's right. And in the other banks, the story is that those who've got under 100,000, which was the insured depositors, they'll be okay. But the ones with over 100,000, they'll be clipped, and people are saying somewhere between 10 and 15%. And then there'll be some other part of the package, which is not quite clear, but they'll rustle together a bit of money from somewhere or other to make up the gap and have enough money in the kitty so that then the Eurozone is willing to give that big chunk of money, the 10 billion euros, which is what will be necessary for Cyprus to keep going, and then the European Central Bank is willing to pump liquidity into the banks, and that could be tens of billions more.
If we go back to something quite close to where we started, but in the interim the economy of the country has suffered significantly, it doesn't say very much for the way this whole thing has been handled, does it?
Well, no, it's been handled disastrously. I mean, the prime culprits here, frankly, are the Cypriots, because their last government spent about a year refusing to address this problem. If it had been addressed a year ago, the problem would be far...
Well, the current president's only been in power.
That's right. But yes, but the previous president was a disaster and virtually criminal in his failure not to address the problem. But the current president, who's only been there for less than a month, he has turned a crisis into a disaster by going along with this 6.75%, as